Well, yeah, Harrison Smith has made the Pro Bowl the last 5 years. And other than Daniil Hunter, I can't really think of that many relevant Minnesota Vikings players that are the reason the Vikings keep making the playoffs. But Harrison Smith to me is I think he's the common denominator in all of this. And I think a lot of the success with the Minnesota Vikings sticks with the defense, and I think the defense goes as Harrison Smith goes. I think he's one of the commanders to a team that regularly makes it into the playoffs, and I think he's one of the more dangerous players in all of football. And I think that having him has definitely been a blessing for Minnesota Vikings fans. And I'll just get into Harrison Smith in a second. But for now, it is Monday, July 20th, 2020. I here in the quarantine. I'm James Sims. And for this episode of The Elite, I was going to do an elite profile on Harrison Smith. And if you aren't aware who Harrison Smith is a 31-year-old safety who currently plays for the Minnesota Vikings. He stands at about 6'2", 214. If you see him play, you kind of see him as if Luke Kuechly was a safety. He reads, he reads plays incredibly well. He does really well in coverage, but he's an incredible tackler. He doesn't let go. And within the last 5 years, he's been one of the more elite defensive players. And kind of since he's been there, the Minnesota Vikings have been in and out, dipping in and out of the playoffs. And most of the times, I'm telling you, it's not their offense. It's their defense that's keeping them in that far. And Harrison Smith is leading the way. So to give you a little bit of background, Harrison Smith is straight out of Augusta, Georgia. He would end up going to high school in Tennessee, where he would get recruited to go to Notre Dame, and he would play enough for Notre Dame. He was a good enough prospect to be taken at the end of the first round of the NFL draft. He was taken with the 29th pick in the first round to go to the Minnesota Vikings, and of course, his first year would come in 2012, his age 23 season for the Minnesota Vikings. In Harrison Smith's first year, he would start all 16 games for the Minnesota Vikings, in a season where they would finish 10-6, winning the NFC North. They would lose the wild card game to the Packers, but like Kyle Rudolph and Adrian Peterson were kind of really going off as Adrian. That was the year that Adrian Peterson won the MVP. But of course, Harrison Smith is doing his part on the defensive side. The first round pick had a combined 104 tackles on the season, the most tackles he's had in a season, by the way, up to date in all 16 games. He had a fumble recovery. He also had 3 interceptions, 2 of them for pick six. And at this point, the NFL started to at least send Harrison Smith on the Raiders. After all, he was a first round rookie out of Notre Dame. So what do they know about this guy? But that was an impressive rookie season to come back and look at. Going to his age 24 season in 2013, he ended up starting in 7 of the 8 games he played in the season where the Minnesota Vikings finished 5-10-1. He was injured that year. But in the 8 games he played, he finished with 2 interceptions. He had 58 total tackles in the 8 games that he played, which averaged out would have been more than the rookie season. But that was a crazy season that it looked like it was going to be, but it didn't end up. It didn't end up filling out. But we continue. Going on to his last season before he was a Pro Bowler, before he went on this run. In his age 25 season, he would start all 16 games for the Minnesota Vikings. And in 2014, they finished 7-9. They missed the playoffs. Harrison Smith that year would finish with 5 interceptions, the most he'd have in his career, tied with 2017. He had the most interception return yards he'd ever have in his career. He had 150 interception return yards, one of them being a touchdown. He had 9 passes defended that year, finished with a forced fumble, 92 total tackles on the season, 7 tackles for loss. But that was what Harrison Smith was onto, especially at that time. And he had 3 sacks on the season. They weren't necessarily a playoff team, but Harrison Smith had shown that he had been a consistent all-around player at safety, especially at free safety. But the Vikings weren't going anywhere. This wasn't going to happen until the Vikings made the playoffs again. In his age 26 season, Harrison Smith would be called to his first Pro Bowl in 2015. And of course, in that season, the Minnesota Vikings would clinch the playoffs, but they would lose to the Seahawks. They would lose in 10-9 after clinching the first seed in the North for the very first time since Harrison Smith has been there. But he would be named a Pro Bowl. At that point, he started 13 of the games that he played in. He finished with 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick six. He had 3 passes defended. He had a fumble. He had a forced fumble that year. He had 66 combined tackles in that season, and the Minnesota Vikings got back. And like I said, the defense was a really big part of it, and Harrison Smith was the leading player on that defense. And that was the second year under Mike Zimmer, the first year they made the playoffs with Mike Zimmer as the head coach. And that would lead into the 2016 season when they would finish 8-8. Harrison Smith would be named a Pro Bowler for the second year in his career. He would finish playing 14 games on the season with 2 passes defended, no interceptions, no fumbles, but he finished with 91 tackles on the year, 2 of them being sacks. And the Minnesota Vikings missed the playoffs completely, but they realized that Harrison Smith was slowly and surely becoming that dude at free safety. This would lead into his 2017 year, where Harrison Smith was named not only a Pro Bowler, but he was named a first-team All-Pro. The Vikings finished first in the NFC North. But Harrison Smith would play in all 16 games that season, finishing with 5 interceptions on the season, the most he'd have tied with 2014. He finished with 42 return yards on the season. He had 12 passes defended, the most he'd ever had in his career up until that point. He finished with 78 total tackles on the season, 1.5 of them being sacks. And that season, the Minnesota Vikings, in addition to making the playoffs, they would beat the Saints in the first round, 29-24, with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. They would go on to lose the conference championship at the Eagles. They would lose 39-7, but that was an amazing year. But especially for Harrison Smith, he had established himself as at least one of the top 2 safeties in the league at one season in his career, at one point. And of course, this would continue his streak of 3 seasons in a row of being a Pro Bowler, which would continue through 2018, where the Vikings didn't make the playoffs, but they finished 8-7-1. Harrison Smith still finished with 3 interceptions in the 16 games that he played. He finished with a forced fumble and 84 total tackles on the season. In 2019, the Vikings would make the playoffs for the 3rd time in his career since Harrison Smith has been in Minnesota. They'll finish with a 10-6-0 or 10-6 record, as Harrison Smith would qualify for his 5th straight Pro Bowl, starting in all 15 games, finishing with 3 interceptions on the season, 11 passes defended, 3 forced fumbles, the most he's had in a season, and 2 fumble recoveries. He finished with 85 total tackles as the Minnesota Vikings finished this season, beating the Saints in the wild card, and they lost in the divisional round to the 49ers. But of course, it's the Vikings defense that's been getting them this far, especially continually getting them into the playoffs. And because Harrison Smith has been recognized as an all-pro safety, he was recognized in 2018 after being recognized as the first-team all-safety in 2017. I mean, it shows to what his impact really is on this Minnesota Vikings defense. He really is a lot more than the Vikings really give him credit for. And in that sense, I really appreciate you for giving me a chance or just to listen to what I have to say about Harrison Smith, for listening to all 8 minutes of this. Because at the end of the day, Harrison Smith is an elite safety. He's been a Pro Bowler the last 5 seasons. There's no reason I would think that he wasn't. But like I said, he's an amazing player that really makes the Vikings look a lot better than they are. Give him a chance. Check him out. He wears number 22, wearing safety for the Minnesota Vikings. I promise you, just by watching him, you'll see how much he actually does. And if you're a football fan that watch Luke Kuechly, but you don't watch a lot of the Vikings, I think you'll see a lot of Luke Kuechly and Harrison Smith. His production amounts to wins, and you can see it in the way that he plays. And Harrison Smith is a player I respect. With that, I've said my piece. Thanks for hearing me out. Peace out.